The second half of HMS Victorious's life was quite different from that of her sisters. She would live on where they were scrapped, being given an extensive modernization and rebuild. This allowed her to operate modern aircraft and kept her in service right up to the start of the 1970s, almost. But was all of that effort and money worth it? Before I go further, I will note that Victorious is my second favorite carrier right after Saratoga. So don't take the title as a negative thing, though I'm sure I'll probably still get an angry or ranty comment or two. With that out of the way, as I brought up in the previous video, I figured that Victorious's rebuild justified a video of its own. A short video, perhaps, but a video all the same. The rebuild of this carrier is one of the most extensive rebuilds done on any ship, period, no matter what type, especially when it wasn't a conversion like the old battlecruiser conversions. Victorious was torn down to her bones with a practically new ship built atop them. She is, as such, the quintessential new ship on old bones. And the question of if that was worth it is one that needs to be asked. So let's begin. Victorious was put in reserve in 1947 before replacing HMS Nelson in the Home Fleet Training Squadron. She would do such duties, along with the odd refit, until 1950. In this, she served light duty that kept her moving and maintained, but didn't really wear her down. This is important because in 1950, we get to the meat of this video. Her rebuild. A rebuild that was not, by any means, initially intended to be unique to her. However, you see, the British had a shortage of funds at the time. Multiple incomplete light fleet carriers were languishing because the Royal Navy couldn't get the funding to complete them. The Malta class had been cancelled entirely, and the Audacious class had been slashed down from 4 to 2. Which with their own chaotic development, ended up coming out as 2 one-offs, sisters in name more than in practice. So with this in mind, the Royal Navy looked to their World War II era armored carriers. Much as the USN was modernizing the Essex class, could the British do the same? Well, they certainly wanted to. They wanted to modernize all 6 of those ships, reasoning that they could be done at half the cost of a new build carrier and last perhaps another 20 years in service. It was clear that ships of their vintage could be made to operate modern aircraft well enough. However, problems quickly arose. Victorious was in the best material condition of the sisters, having been in limited service since the end of World War II. Furthermore, she was worked less than her sisters during the war and took far less hard use and far less damage. This would make her an obvious first choice for an extensive rebuild, as it would, at first glance, seem like she required the least amount of work to do so. Instead, the British wanted to do her second, with her sister Formidable, who was perhaps the worst damage of the bunch, first on the docket. As it would turn out, while Formidable was initially planned to be modernized first, she had been laid up since the end of the war, and not maintained well, if at all. She was basically rusting away in place, with all that implies. Couple that with severe and largely lingering damage from the war, and Formidable was removed from consideration. Victorious took her place on an initial cost estimate of £5.4 million. Her refit, more of a rebuild, was intended to finish in 1955, while other ships could start later on. While Victorious started in 1950, it quickly became apparent that her cost to rebuild was running higher and higher. Moreover, there weren't enough skilled dock workers to even keep Victorious on schedule. Forget having enough to fix damage on the other illustrious sisters, while also rebuilding them. Cash-strapped as they were, the Royal Navy couldn't afford to modernize her entire class like that, especially with the lingering damage and other issues in the other ships. As such, the plans were first cut down to modernize just Implacable, alongside a couple of the light fleet carriers and HMS Unicorn. Which is where I'll detour to say that the Implacable class ships were even less worn out and damaged than Victorious. However, with their double hangars and plans to replace their boilers, they were likely to be more expensive than the initial estimate for a rebuild. As a direct result of that, and the cost overruns on Victorious, all of the other plans were cancelled. Victorious would end up being the only one of her vintage to receive a rebuild. The rest of her sisters, and their successors, would be scrapped in short order. Victorious lingered on, as too much money had been poured into her rebuild, and she was now the only one that could be finished. And believe me, it was a rebuild, not a refit, make no mistake here. Victorious was cut down basically to the waterline to build an entirely new hangar deck so she could operate larger aircraft. Changes in technology and new developments, such as the angled flight deck, saw her further modified while under refit. This led to increasing cost and a rebuild that should have taken 5 years, stretching on even further. The lack of skilled workers didn't help, especially with the fitful starts and stops as new technologies were crammed in. Not helped by the fact that, in 1953, a survey of her power plant indicated it would be worn out completely by 1964. Victorious was intended to serve longer than a decade. So in spite of her flight deck already being largely built up again, a hole had to be cut down all the way to her boilers and turbines, whereupon they were replaced and the hole was filled in. This was done both to extend her service life and because her old power plant couldn't run both her new steam catapults and the ship at the same time. As one could expect, this is really the kind of thing that should have been noticed before 3 years of work had been finished. That it wasn't is just a sign of how slapdash this rebuild really was. It was a mess of conflicting desires and new requirements that dragged on and on and on. What should have taken 5 years and cost maybe £10 million ended up dragging out to 8 years and £30 million. As I said earlier, what came out was a new ship built on old bones. She increased in displacement to about 35,000 tons, while gaining in length from 743 feet to 778 feet. Her flight deck further gained about 40 feet, going from 103 feet to 145 feet in width. As a result, Victorious was an effective ship, make no mistake about that. She could operate any modern aircraft in British inventory, and was, in some ways, more modern than any other carrier in the world in 1958, save for the new supercarriers in the USN. One should hope so, considering her hull was widened, deepened, and lengthened. She had American 3-inch anti-aircraft guns fitted, a proper angled flight deck added, along with those steam catapults. Furthermore, her radar and other electronics were brought up to modern standards. The end result of all of this was a ship that was hoped to operate up to 50 aircraft, though in an early sign of how dubious this rebuild would prove, Victorious can only operate about 28, and that's including helicopters. The march of technology and resulting increase in size of aircraft was already leaving her behind. She was already on the smaller end for a fleet carrier to begin with, after all. Compare and contrast to a rebuilt Essex that could, if necessary, still manage 50 or more aircraft. Her service after the refit would also prove to be fairly minimal. Victorious would largely serve on training missions and overseas deployments, not seeing combat again. This was useful service, don't get me wrong. She got to serve alongside Saratoga CV-60, thus being one of the few carriers to serve with both aircraft carrier Saratogas. She would help the British learn how to operate more modern aircraft, even gain the chance to land an F-4 Phantom, demonstrating that she could, theoretically, operate that powerful aircraft. There was also the time she got to be a movie star. She played herself and Ark Royal during the filming of Sink the Bismarck, in spite of her modernizations substantially changing how she looked. Though that isn't really any different from Essex-class ships being used as stand-ins for Japanese carriers or Yorktowns around the same time. As it was, the closest to real excitement Victorious would see came in supporting Kuwait against Iraqi aggression in July 1961, as well as supporting Malaysia against Indonesia in 1964. In both cases, her presence deterred offensive action, and she would see no combat. Come 1967, which is less than a decade after her major rebuild, Victorious entered into routine refit. Her final refit, as it would turn out. During this process, on November 11th, a fire broke out in her galley. A fire caused by a teapot left on and boiled dry. While possibly the most British way possible to start a fire, this would kill a man and cause a fair bit of damage. Not enough to delay her refit by any appreciable amount, mind you, but with the British in one of their periodic cut the military to the bone phases, the government jumped on the chance to pull Victorious out of service and save some money. As a result, Victorious would be decommissioned. Her captain was told this the day before her scheduled recommissioning ceremony. Her crew, understandably, said screw that and held the ceremony anyway as a final respect for their beloved ship. Victorious would then be paid off in 1968 and scrapped in 1969. She still had a few years left of service in her at that point, though it was not meant to be. And thus, with the end of Victorious, we come back to the initial question. Was her rebuild worth it? Did it go too far? Well, had Britain ended up in a shooting war, I can imagine they would have quite liked having Victorious there. She was worth it in the hypothetical sense of a modernized, if small, carrier. However, one cannot ignore that doing such a substantial refit on her made it impossible to refit other ships that might otherwise have been rebuilt. The British got one completely rebuilt ship, when they could have gotten several less rebuilt, but still useful carriers instead. Hypothetically, of course, as this was a time period where the British were eager to get rid of anything they couldn't use right away. Not to mention, at the very least, all of the armored carriers would have required having their hangar decks extended so that they could actually manage jet aircraft. So one can just as easily say that without the sunk costs put into her, Victorious would have been scrapped along with her sisters and never seen any sort of modernization at all. It's a symptom of cost cutting in the Royal Navy and general mismanagement in a lot of ways. Still, one cannot ignore that Victorious managed a good decade of service after her rebuild. Service that saw her sail across the world in training and deterrent missions. I can't say she didn't give good return on the money, no matter what view you take on her rebuild. Was it too expensive? Was it too drawn out? Yes. Was it worth it? Well, in the sense of getting a good carrier out of the deal, even if she couldn't manage many aircraft, I would say yes. Not to mention she was a legitimately beautiful ship, which is always a plus. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you in the next one.